everyone, my name is Jacqueline Vu, an employee at DDSAnalytics, and today I'm here to present to you all the EDA on nutrition at Frito Lay. To predict attrition, I had to build two classification models, one being the naive Bayes and two being the KN. After performing the naive Bayes, the accuracy rate turned out to be around 80%, the sensitivity rate being almost 84%, and the specificity rate being around 60%. For the KN model, the accuracy rate was almost 75%, the sensitivity rate being almost 82%, and the specificity rate being around 39%. Both classification models are reasonably good at identifying employees who will be staying at Frito Lay. That's because their sensitivity rate, both of them, are above 80%. On the contrary, the KN classification model struggled more than the naive Bayes model on identify employees that will be leaving Frito Lay. That's because there's a huge difference between the specificity rate, one being 39% and the other one being 60%. Since it costs Frito Lay between 50% and 400% of an employee's salary to replace employees, I had to look at every false negative. Every false negative could cost between almost $38K and over $303K. Looking at the confusion matrix of the naive Bayes, 17 employees were predicted as false negatives. That alone could cost Frito Lay between almost $645K and over $5 million to replace them. On the contrary, 35 employees are considered false positive. That doesn't affect Frito Lay financially, but it does induce misallocation of retention resources and an unnecessary intervention on trying to keep them. For the KN classification model, 26 employees were considered false negative. That alone can cost Frito Lay between almost $1 million and over $7 million just to replace them. On the contrary, 40 employees were considered false positive, and I have explained this before, but it doesn't affect Frito Lay financially. So looking at both models, Frito Lay will be losing more money in the long run if they end up using the KNN versus the naive Bayes to predict attrition. The naive Bayes model actually has a higher accuracy, sensitive, and specificity rates compared to the KNN. And although the naive Bayes has a higher predicted number of employees who truly left, the KNN actually has a higher number of false positives. And that's enough reasoning to say that the naive Bayes classification model is the better model of the two to determine the three factors that lead to attrition. So those three factors are: one, whether the employee works overtime; two, the employee's age; and three, how frequent does the employee have to travel. Looking at the pie chart here on the left, there's only a small percentage of them actually quitting. That's 16.48% of them. But if you look at this group bar chart on the right, looking at the overtime status for those who end up leaving the company, there are more of them that left compared to those who didn't, 30% over 10%. By working overtime, that is going to just naturally lead them to leaving the company for good, because these employees feel like Frito Lay is not valuing their time outside of work. And even if they get compensated for working overtime, in the long run, most of them will want to value their health and happiness over being burnt out. Now, although there is only a small percentage of them leaving the company, most of the people who end up leaving the company are in the ages of between the ages of 20 to 40. And that's because most companies are willing to hire those people in their 20s and 30s because they are recent graduates from higher studies. They have the relevant knowledge to contribute towards Frito Lay. Since they are the largest group, that makes sense that they're going to be the largest group to also leave the company. Out of curiosity, I had to analyze the overtime stats for each age group, and it stayed the same. those who are in their 20s and 30s are more likely to leave Frito Lay due to it being overworked. They do have a lot of stamina, which means they can handle the workload. But with more workload thrown onto them, then they have to stay overtime to finish those work. And then that's just going to lead them to wanting to leave the company in the long run. So Frito Lay needs to be more mindful on whether they want to keep their employees working overtime or not, because if they continue to keep them working overtime, that's going to lead them to the decrease in quality of contribution to the company, and therefore making these employees want to leave for good. So my solution here is to hire more employees who are in their 20s and 30s, because of course, with more of them in the company can divide the workload more evenly, and that should lead to more of them not staying overtime to work, which means less of them leaving the company for good. Now, regardless whether they stay or leave the company, most employees rarely travel. That's because Frito-Lay makes most of the larger workload done on-site versus off-site. Now, this is financially smarter for Frito-Lay. The problem with that is the employees who are working on site, they feel more burdened with the workload. That leads to burnout, and therefore they're going to be want to leave the company for good. Additionally, by making them stay at the company, not letting them travel frequently or more often, they feel like they're stunted with their professional growth. With the lack of professional growth, they will feel bored working at the company because they're just doing the same task over and over instead of trying new things, and that's just going to lead them wanting to leave the company for good. Seeing that, I propose that Frito-Lay should open more travel opportunities for their employees, because that's going to help them grow professionally. As long as they're having a reasonable amount of work when they're trying new tasks, that should lead them to be more interested in their work, which means they should be staying at the company much longer. Now, this is going to cost Frito-Lay more money, but at the end of the day, it's okay to expend more money for better quality of work. Thank you for listening to my presentation.